Headlines of the hour. Clinton has 20 electoral votes, we estimate. Bush none, Perot none. Clinton is off to a start, rolling like a big wheel through a Georgia cotton field. Clinton has won 2 states, we estimate, and one of them is Georgia, with 13 electoral votes. This is potentially big news for the Democrats. Early, they get a crack in what was previously the solid South for the Republicans. We estimate when all the votes are in and counted, Bill Clinton will have Georgia's 13 electoral votes, a very big, important state for him to carry. In New Hampshire, in the upper Northeast, Bill Clinton takes it. New Hampshire almost always goes for Republican candidates, not this time. 4 electoral votes go in Bill Clinton's column from there. Vermont, a special world for Bill Clinton tonight. 3 electoral votes in Vermont. Now 2 upper northeastern states have gone for Clinton, Vermont and New Hampshire, plus a big one down in Georgia. In Indiana, 12 electoral votes. This state normally gets called very early for the Republicans. Not so this time. That could, underscore the word could, be an indicator of what's to come later tonight. In the actual votes in and counted, 19% of the precincts reporting from Indiana, President Bush leads. He is expected to carry this state, but his lead over Governor Clinton is not such that we feel comfortable at this moment saying he has carried the state. Now let's show you Kentucky. In the bluegrass state, 8 electoral votes. Both Bush and Clinton fought very hard for it. Both Bush and Reagan carried this during the 1980s, but with the polls closed there for more than a half hour, it's still too close to call. These are the actual votes in and reported, with 53% of the precincts reporting so far. Clinton, 20 electoral votes, 270 needed to win. Bush has none, and Perot has zip.
Campaign 92, Election Night, with Dan Rather, Ed Bradley, Connie Chung, Mike Wallace, Bob Schieffer, and Charles Kuralt. From CBS News election headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
Hello, and welcome to what we hope you'll find to be the clearest, most complete, and up-to-the-minute election night analysis anywhere on your dial. With the first substantial results of the night in so far, there are the possible makings out there. Underline the word possible, italicize the word possible, the possible makings of not a very good night for the top of the Republican ticket. It's too early to say who's going to win this election. However, the fact that Bill Clinton has carried Georgia is big news, the biggest news of the hour. The last time Vermont and New Hampshire went for a Democrat was in the Johnson landslide of 1964 against Barry Goldwater. Tonight, both New Hampshire and Vermont, by our CBS News estimate, we think when all the votes have been counted, both of those northeastern states will have gone to the Clinton-Gore ticket. And there's also early Southern comfort tonight for Clinton-Gore in the Georgia results. Let's go to the map that will tell tonight's presidential story. Remember, it isn't the overall vote that finally decides it. It's 270 electoral votes needed to win. Clinton has carried the states in blue: Georgia, New Hampshire, and Vermont. The other states, they're in white on your set for those of you looking in color. The polls have closed there, but we do not have enough information to indicate a winner. A big one, and possibly an important one, in Florida. This is one of the so-called big enchiladas. By everybody's arithmetic, if the Bush Quayle ticket does not carry Florida, it's very difficult for them to win. And usually Florida goes heavily Republican, so heavy that you can call it in the first few minutes. That has not happened so far. Also in Indiana, which is normally heavily Republican, no call there. Kentucky, a southern border state that the Democrats thought they might have an easy time in, not so. Kentucky, too close to call. Now, helping us try to sort out who won, who lost, and why, and what it may mean to you, CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Bob Schieffer is keeping tabs on the U.S. Senate. We also already have a couple of decisions in Senate races. Connie Chung is following the important issues in Campaign 92, including some of the initiatives that you, the voters, put on the ballot around the country. That would include the death penalty issue on the ballot in the District of Columbia. 60 Minutes correspondent and our old friend Mike Wallace looking into some of the nooks and crannies, odds and ends that you may not have thought about in this campaign. He'll be talking to you about some of the funnier advertising that was on your television screen. Sunday morning correspondent Charles Kuralt, our old pal, will bring you his unique insights on the election from, among other places, on the road. And 60 Minutes correspondent Ed Bradley will tell us why we voted the way we did. Ed, on the presidential desk now, Bill Clinton has apparently carried Georgia. What did it for him?
Well, for one thing, in Georgia, Clinton's share of the white vote is 10 points higher than Dukakis in 1988. He got about the same share of the black vote as Dukakis did in '88. He's getting 37% of the white vote, and that's what did it for him. We took a look at talking to people coming out of polls across the country and saw one issue that stood head and shoulders above all others, and it was the economy. And the state of the economy, we asked people, only 1% thought the economy was excellent, 18% good. But take a look at the negatives. 46% not so good, poor 33%. That's a total of 79% who had a negative view of the economy. And when we asked them about the president's handling of the economy, only 34% approved of his handling, 22% disapproved somewhat, and 43% disapproved strongly. So you look at the negatives, that's a total of 65% who had a negative view of the president's handling of the economy. How does that pay off in the polls? Take a look at two states Democrats don't win, New Hampshire, Vermont. 90% of the voters in New Hampshire said the economy is very bad or poor. 41% of Vermonters say that their personal financial situation is worse off than it was 4 years ago.
So the economy and jobs, clearly the issue above all others.
There was nothing else that seemed to be even close.
Bill Clinton leads in the Electoral College vote count, the all-important one, 270 needed to win. Clinton has 20 electoral votes by our CBS News estimate. Neither Bush nor Perot has any. Now, 5 Senate races at this hour, results in 2, we believe. Bob Schieffer, those 2 results are in, well, we have another now. This just in, state of Florida, as expected, incumbent Democratic Senator Graham will be returned to the U.S. Senate from Florida. Now, if you're asking what's happening in Florida in the presidential race, answer is we do not know. Too close. Indiana carries for George Bush. No surprise here. We're now comfortable in saying that Indiana will go for the Bush-Quayle ticket. Widely expected, as we mentioned before, the importance at this hour, if any, is that it took so long for Indiana to get called, indicating a closer race there than is generally the case. If George Bush did not carry Indiana by more than, say, 8 percentage points, it could indicate he's going to have a very long night. But George Bush gets his first electoral votes of the night. Bill Clinton, we estimate now, has 20. George Bush has 12. Bush having carried Indiana by our CBS News estimate. We think when all the votes are in and counted in Indiana, that George Bush will have carried it. Now, note on the map in white, states where the polls have closed, but we have not enough results on which to make an estimate. The biggest one of those is Florida. If George Bush does not carry Florida, if he doesn't carry Florida, that would be considered the biggest sign so far that he might be in for a long night. Already, our CBS News estimate is that Bush-Quayle have lost Georgia. Not good news for them, but, and this is important, the election's a long way from being over. For those of you where the polls are still open, particularly those of you in the Rocky Mountain states in the West, we have a long way to go. Please go out and vote. It's of utmost importance. Bob Schieffer, what's happening in the Senate? In Vermont, Leahy is returned.
Leahy wins in Vermont. I think, Dan, also that Dan Coates has won in Indiana, and I think that is going to be a sizable victory for him. You just mentioned Bob Graham has won in Florida. So far, what's happening in the Senate races is what is supposed to happen. You have incumbents that were heavily favored that are winning. There are a couple of very close races we should know the answer to before this hour is out. That is down in Georgia, where White Fowler is in a very tough contest with Paul Coverdale, a former Peace Corps director. And Fowler, we can say, has taken a lead there. That, as yet, though, we cannot call that race. Also down in South Carolina, one of the hottest races of the night, Fritz Hollings going against Tommy Hartnett. This one, we're showing these percentages now, but this one is not ready to call. This one is much closer at this point than those percentages show. One of the things we have found, Dan, as we've looked around tonight, is how are the Perot voters cutting it. What we're finding is incumbent senators, when it looks like when they picture themselves as agents of change, they are getting the Perot vote. It's a very close race. Notice here, both Hollings and White Fowler down in Florida getting only 40% of the Perot votes. So for them, it's a very tight race. But there's a lot of change, just the smell of change in the air tonight, Dan. And when you see Democrats starting to win in New Hampshire, it's going to be a long night, I'm afraid, for Republicans.
Well, at this hour and in the hour to immediately follow this one, I can tell you that it will be so exciting as to make the wax pop out of your ears if you love politics. And here's why. There is change in the air. You can already see it in the results. A Democrat, for the first time in a long while in the presidential race, has carried Georgia. That's our CBS News estimate. Florida, no decision there yet. It's an absolutely must-get. Both Florida and Texas absolutely have to have it for the Bush quail forces to have much of a chance as the evening goes along. Our count at the moment is Clinton has 20 electoral votes by our CBS News estimate. George Bush has 12. Perot, none. Perot's strength is expected to be whatever he has, mostly in the Southwest and perhaps the very far West. But that's the way it stands at the moment with 270 electoral votes needed to win. Connie Chung, we know that the economy is issue number 1, 2, and 3. But there are other important issues at work in this wind of change that seems to be blowing.
That's right. And we looked at the issues that mattered most, but also the issues that mattered least, because they are just as telling. Let's look at the issues that mattered most first. As you said, economy 43%, deficit 22%, and surprisingly, health care 21%. This is significant because Clinton campaigned hard on the issues of the economy and health care. Clinton did well among voters who chose those as important issues. The deficit, second on the list, perhaps thanks to Ross Perot. It was the cornerstone of his campaign. Let's look at the issues that mattered least. Abortion. A major topic at last summer's GOP convention, just 11% chose it as important. Foreign policy, the president's strong point, only 8% cared about it. And the environment. Painting Al Gore as an environmental extremist was a top priority of the Bush quail campaign, but only 6% said the environment was driving their vote. And Dan, finally, family values came in fourth, which I think might surprise some political experts because they poo-pooed it as a non-issue.
Well, the so-called experts, including this one, are so often wrong that by this time it's moot because the only thing that counts now is your vote. Yes, we're going to say again, if you haven't voted, make the effort. Get yourself down to the polling place. Take someone with you to the polling place, then come back and watch our coverage. Remember, the polls are still open in most areas of the country. We're talking at this hour about some states that, by our CBS News estimates, and let me pause and say that over the years, CBS News has been the most conservative in saying when a race has been decided in a state, have been by far the most accurate over the years. So when we say that a decision is in, we're pretty confident that that is true. Now, we will not, in the presidential race, say a new president has been elected or that our present president has been reelected until we're absolutely certain of that. There is no question at this hour that the Clinton-Gore ticket is off to a good start. Why do we say that? Because Vermont and New Hampshire, frequently Republican states, have both fallen into place for the Clinton-Gore ticket. Also, Georgia, very important state, hard-fought state. Many Republicans felt, well, if we can't hold on to Georgia, we're going to have an extremely difficult time. They didn't. If the states in blue, you see Georgia, New Hampshire, and Vermont, we put in the Clinton column. That gives him 20 electoral votes. Indiana, after a longer time to count it than normally takes, we estimate goes in the column for George Bush and Vice President Quayle, that, of course, being Vice President Quayle's home state. So that's how we get 20 to 12 of the vote. Keep your eye on Florida. That's what we're looking at here. Now, the Bush quail campaign probably has to have both Florida and Texas now to make the mathematics go for them. No decision in Florida. Bush was widely expected to win in Florida because he carried it in 1988 and Ronald Reagan carried it twice before. However, the indications were all during the day that it was tick-tight in Florida. Keep your eye on it. Ed Bradley.
Dan, in Florida, so what looks like good news for Bill Clinton and bad news for the president is that Clinton is winning the senior vote in Florida, 53 to 35%. And that's a big vote in the state of Florida. And 12% of the seniors say that their own financial situation is better. 43% say it's worse, but he's still getting that vote. And also in Florida, 22% said that they had a close friend or relative who was affected by Hurricane Andrew. And the president was down there for that, but Clinton is getting more than half of those voters.
I want to emphasize, however, that we do not have a call in Florida, not as yet. We don't have enough information to make an estimate on how it's going to go. At this moment, it is clearly the most important state since the polls have closed there, and we're looking for some kind of decision soon. But as close as it's been in Florida, we may not get it. Mike Wallace, you've been watching, listening, making a few phone calls. What are you tracking over there?
Dan, this desk is going to leave the vote counting and the punditry to you and Connie and Bob and my colleague Ed Bradley tonight. Here, we're going to be talking about things like voter turnout, which is said to be very heavy all across the country, despite some bad weather across the country. we're going to have an abbreviated film festival of commercials which most of the audience watching tonight has never seen. And shortly we're going to be talking with a variety of individuals we all know well who'll tell you not who they voted for, but the way and why they voted for him for president. Thus, plus assorted comments if and when you call upon us, Dan.
We'll do it as often as we can. We estimate that Bill Clinton has 20 electoral votes. George Bush has 12. Bush has carried Indiana. 270 electoral votes needed to win. CBS News Sunday morning correspondent Charles Kuralt, you've been checking over the issues. What are some of the issues that didn't get quite as much attention as some others, but that you still find important?
Well, this night is very exciting, as you said, Dan, and the glow for the president-elect is going to last about a day before reality sets in. Campaigns are exhilarating, governing is sober, hard business, and the country does face some problems that haven't been much talked about. What about race, the oldest American problem? Both candidates skirted the issue. Bill Clinton kept Jesse Jackson practically hidden, and kept his own appeal to black voters muted in order to win in the white suburbs. Might be understandable in a political campaign, but an impossible way for a caring president to behave. What about the people sleeping in the streets of every large city? An intolerable situation for a country that calls itself great. What about the rusting bridges and streets and highways with potholes? All three candidates promised jobs and health care for everybody, easy to promise, hard to deliver in a time of fiscal restraint. Hardly even have to mention the great dangers in the breakup of the Soviet Union, not much talked about in the campaign, including potential nuclear dangers. Atrocities are occurring in ex-Yugoslavia. Candidates can avoid facing these facts. A president of the United States cannot. So, a day or two of celebration for the new president, whoever he may be, then thousands of days of dilemmas, and we can all come together pretty soon now, Dan, and wish him good judgment and good luck.
Right you are, Charles. At this hour, Clinton, we believe, has carried New Hampshire, Vermont, and Georgia for 20 electoral votes. President Bush has carried Indiana for a total of 12 electoral votes, 270 needed to win. The polls have closed in Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, and Virginia, but in all of those races, as of this moment, it's too close to call. Our CBS News coverage of Campaign 92 will continue in a moment. Stay here with us.
And real estate.
Ross Perot has no electoral votes from any state. He may not get any. However, nationally, on what we know so far, Perot is running much stronger than third-party candidates usually do. He's running roughly in the 16 to 17% range at the moment. We'll keep you abreast of that as time goes along. Keep your eye for the moment on two states, Florida and Virginia. These become almost must-have states for George Bush, particularly Florida. No decision in either of those states yet, although the polls have closed there. Best news of the night for Bill Clinton is that he carried Georgia. Best news of the night for President Bush so far is that he has carried one state, and that is Indiana. Let's check in with our three CBS News correspondents who covered the campaigns every step of the way. First, correspondent Richard Threlkeld in Little Rock. Richard, I would expect that you heard some cheers when the news came in about Georgia.
So far, Dan, there's been cheering for several hours here on the grounds of the old State House in downtown Little Rock, where about 3 hours from now, Bill Clinton will say whatever he has to say about the results of this election, win or lose. He's going to wait till the lower 48 state polls close about 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Hundreds of people, as you see, have been waiting out here in the rain to hear what Bill Clinton has to say. This town of 250,000 people, it's like the Super Bowl dropped in on Detroit or Des Moines or Peoria. They're a little stunned, don't quite know what to make of it. But we talked to a few of those folks around today, and as you can see, there's a lot of umbrellas and a lot of expectant people waiting. But overall, so far at least, with all the attention, Little Rock is coping, Dan.
Thanks, Richard Threlkeld, live in Little Rock. Let's whip down to Houston and CBS News White House correspondent Susan Spencer. Yes. Susan, the early news has not been good for the Bush-Quayle campaign, but gather that they are not hanging crepe yet, not by a long shot.
Not quite, Dan. I'm at the site of what's supposed to be the Bush Quayle Victory Party. As you can see right now, that party is restricted pretty much to reporters. They've just started to let the guests in. They've just opened the bar, which could prove helpful later on if things don't look very good for Mr. Bush. He is not expected here till after the polls out west close, and it's unclear how soon after that he might show up, depending on how things are going. I was told late this afternoon that he wasn't getting these early projections from the exit polls, that apparently he had decided to wait a little bit until he started getting information. He had a very busy day in any case. He went jogging, he got his hunting license renewed, all of course designed to project this image of optimism in an upset. Dan?
Thank you very much, Susan Spencer. And let's go to Big D, where Patsy Cline is always in favor, and our CBS News correspondent, Bill Lagatuda. Bill?
Dan, here in this ballroom tonight, you can bet that they will be playing the Patsy Cline tune "Crazy." That's Ross Perot's adopted theme song now. As you hear, the band is warming up. Ross Perot is going to throw himself a Texas-sized party here tonight in a room that is surrounded appropriately, I think, for this campaign by giant television screens. This was, as you know, almost exclusively a campaign wagered on television. Ross Perot spending up to $60 million of his own money and getting people to tune into a program where a man sits behind a desk and flips through a chart. That was incredible enough in itself. Ross Perot today seemed calm, and we expect him here later tonight. Dan?
Bill Lagatuda live in Dallas. Bill Clinton has at least 20 electoral votes by our CBS News estimate. President Bush has 12, having carried Indiana. Is there an avalanche in the making? Far too early to say that. The fact that Clinton has carried New Hampshire and Vermont as the evening goes along will raise the question, but we don't have the answer. Dan Rather at CBS News election headquarters in New York.
This is CBS.
Take the time to care from TV8.
Lines of the hour. The drama intensifies. Bill Clinton picks up another state. In the words of the West Virginia license plates, West Virginia proves wild and wonderful for Bill Clinton. He picks up 5 electoral votes there. West Virginia has an unemployment rate of 11.3%, so no surprise, but it adds to Bill Clinton's electoral vote total. Now, in Georgia, perhaps the biggest Clinton win of the night because he cracks into what had been the Reagan-Bush strength in the solid South of Deep Dixie. Clinton, we estimate, when all the votes are in and counted, will have Georgia's 13 electoral votes. In Vermont, a state that often goes Republican, this time it does not. 3 electoral votes fall for Bill Clinton in Vermont. Also in New Hampshire, 4 electoral votes in the Granite State. They go to Bill Clinton. Perhaps not since Lyndon Johnson's avalanche win over Barry Goldwater have we seen the early indications of the upper Northeast going for the Democrats. However, we only have decisions so far in New Hampshire and Vermont. Now, in Indiana, good news, the only clearly good news of the night for George Bush and Dan Quayle so far. Quayle's home state, Indiana, after some delay, was called for Bush Quayle. This is with 30% of the precincts actually in and reporting in Indiana, but we believe in the final analysis, when all of the precincts in and reporting and all the votes counted in Indiana, that George Bush will have carried it. Now, the Electoral Vote College at the moment, with 270 votes needed to win, stands as follows. Bill Clinton with 25. That reflects his just now pickup in West Virginia. George Bush has 12. Ross Perot none, with 270 electoral votes needed to win.
CBS News election night coverage continues. Here again is Dan Rather.
On the half-hour mark, it's now just past 7:30 in the East. 2 big states that now have become absolutely must-have for George Bush had their polls closed. That would be North Carolina and Ohio. With the arithmetic now at hand, if George Bush does not carry at least one of those states, and probably has to carry both North Carolina and Ohio, it could be sayonara for him. Fact of the matter is, the polls have been closed for some time in Florida, Kentucky, and Virginia. No decisions in those states either. We don't have enough information to make what we consider to be a very accurate estimate. So if you add Ohio, North Carolina to Florida, Kentucky, and Virginia, you can say that George Bush, at an absolute rot-gut minimum, would have to have 4 of those 5 states, probably has to have all 5 to stay in the hunt. Florida, Kentucky, Virginia, Ohio, North Carolina, we don't have a call on any of those. West Virginia, we have just put in Bill Clinton's column, which gives him 25 electoral votes. Bush has 12. But the real story is the Republicans not being able to win their states so far. Let's go to the map, and we want to show you, put the map up again, and see how tonight's electoral vote count has changed. Georgia went for Ronald Reagan twice, went for George Bush in 1988, gone, out of here for Bill Clinton. Up in the Northeast, Vermont and New Hampshire, both of which normally go Republican, ditto. West Virginia, as we mentioned, with unemployment so high there, was expected to go for Clinton, but important for him, he got it. Ed Bradley on the presidential desk, why is Ohio so tight? Generally, Ohio is a state that shades the Republicans in presidential races.
Well, it is, and it's close because of the economy. It's a state that's doing better in some areas than most other states. We took a look at how the voters felt about the economy there, and about a quarter of them said that they were doing better this year than they were 4 years ago, and President Bush wins those votes. 28% say they're doing worse, and Bill Clinton is getting those votes. The battleground will be on the 44% who say that they're doing the same, and that battleground, those people don't fall on either side, because Ohio, more than most states, has a huge percentage of independent voters. Almost half of the voters in Ohio are registered as independents, so that you don't have a natural constituency there that's going to fall for your party. And I might also add, taking a look at North Carolina, Dan, that Clinton is doing 6 points better than Dukakis did in 1988. That's the same picture that we saw in Georgia.
Thanks, Ed Bradley on the presidential desk. Waiting for results. The polls have closed in North Carolina and Ohio. Don't have decisions there. West Virginia falls for Clinton. Clinton is out to an early lead in the Electoral College vote, but let me pause and say that does not mean, not by a long shot, that the election is over. Polls are still open in many places around the country. As we have before, we want to pause and say, if you haven't voted, please vote. Take somebody with you. It does matter. Wherever you think the race is going to go, don't listen to anybody who says, well, you know, I think it's already been decided, or it won't make much difference. Baloney. It matters. Your vote matters. Please go out and vote if you haven't done so already. Now, joining us now is Ron Brown, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Mr. Brown, thank you for being with us. A moment ago, Charles Kuralt, in his first essay of the evening, talked about the fact that there's been little talk in this campaign about race relations. Why, and do you think it matters?
It does matter, and I don't think it's true. The fact is that one of the reasons why Bill Clinton's message has resonated so well around America is it's a message of unity, of bringing our people together, of making us one nation, about forgetting these so-called wedge issues which Republicans love to identify, that splinter us and tear us apart, but rather to build bridges between us so that we look to the future with hope and optimism. I think it's a good thing for American politics that voters are talking about jobs and the economy and health care and education, things that we can all relate to, things that we all care about.
You're aware, Chairman Brown, that a lot of people say that if Governor Clinton were to win tonight, that he would wake up tomorrow morning with, in effect, a bad hangover, because the country's economic problems are deep and abiding, social problems deep and abiding, and that he would have to realize from the start that he's probably going to be a one-term president if he's elected. Do you agree with that?
I don't agree with that at all. Bill Clinton is a can-do person. I think there's going to be a lot of talk tonight about strategy and how did we make this happen and what strategic decisions were made when. If Bill Clinton wins tonight, it's because he has been one extraordinary candidate, and I believe is going to be a great president. He has a real vision for the future. That's what this administration has been lacking. The American people don't expect every solution to work, but they do expect the president to try some things to get our country back on track again. Bill Clinton is going to be putting forth an agenda for the future, which is going to say we've got to try some things. We've got to make some tough decisions. We've got to focus on what is best in America. I think that's the kind of leadership we're going to see.
Ron Brown, let's keep the camera on, Ron Brown. Folks, if you're out there saying, why is this man smiling? I will tell you why he's smiling. The Democrats have carried Georgia, which Ron Brown and every other Democrat was worried. They were having 3,000 calorie attacks over whether or not they could carry Georgia. They carried it. That's one reason he's smiling. The other, of course, is that they're out to an early lead in the Electoral College. Chairman Brown, thank you for being with us. May talk to you later.
But Dan, could I just add, I want
Sure.
to reinforce your message, and that is that there are still millions of Americans who have not yet voted. They've got to get out and participate in our democratic process. A decision hasn't been made in many states around the country, and we all as citizens have an obligation to get out there and vote.
Thank you, Ron Brown. And one of the reasons you want to get out there and vote is there are a lot of Senate races just hotter than a hickory fire at this hour. Some of them will be decided by the votes that come in the last few hours, and the polls are open in a lot of states. Bob Schieffer, why are so many incumbents in trouble in the Senate? It's obvious that in a lot of these races, Hanford in North Carolina, Glenn in Ohio, some rather entrenched incumbents are having the fights of their lives.
Well, these are two of the hottest races. The one you just mentioned, the one in North Carolina, where Terry Sanford, a 75-year-old senator, is seeking a second term, and he's in a real fight with Locke Faircloth, a 64-year-old businessman. That race at this point is so close that we can't make any characterization of how it is going. Much the same story in Ohio, where John Glenn, the astronaut, is locked in a real battle with Mike DeWine, the lieutenant governor out there. One of the things at the beginning of this kind of election cycle people wondered about, Dan, is would a vote against the Persian Gulf War hurt or help these senators? Both of these senators voted against going to war in the Persian Gulf. We looked at that tonight. Terry Sanford, 23% of the people said that that war vote was important. The people who thought that was important, only 23% voted for Terry Sanford tonight. John Glenn did a little bit better, but he got only 40% of the people who thought that vote was important. Neither of these races have been decided, but you can see that is a factor in these races.
Bob, I want to ask you, in a state like North Carolina, which is a ding-dong battle between Bill Clinton and President Bush. The polls have closed in North Carolina. It's very close. Could a Clinton victory in North Carolina possibly be enough, by a wide enough margin, to pull Sanford through? Or is the thinking that even if Clinton carries North Carolina, he hasn't done that it wouldn't be by a wide enough margin to help Sanford?
I think for him to have any coattails in a state like North Carolina, he'd have to win by a pretty good-sized margin, because this is a very hot fight that has a lot of other factors that enter into it besides just this. John Glenn, though, has pulled in. We can say that he is leading in Ohio, but I stress we haven't called that race yet.
Thanks very much, Bob Schieffer. Florida, Kentucky, Virginia, Ohio, and North Carolina now become practically 5 must-win states for George Bush. The polls have closed in all 5 of those states, but we don't have enough information on which to make a call. With 270 electoral votes needed to win, our estimate is that Bill Clinton now has 25. That includes his most recent win in West Virginia. George Bush has 12, having carried Indiana. Connie Chung is covering the 12 gubernatorial races this year. Connie, any results so far in those governor's races?
Yes, we do. The polls have closed in 5 of those states. We have 4 winners. They're all Democrats. Let's take a look at these boards. In Indiana, home of Dan and Marilyn Quayle, Governor Evan Bayh is the big winner. He's the nation's youngest governor, only 36 years old, beating Lindley Pearson, who is the state attorney general. In Vermont, Democratic Governor Howard Dean is the incumbent. He's the nation's only governor who is also a physician. He's the big winner tonight. In North Carolina, former Governor Jim Hunt is the winner. He'll be returned to the State House. He went home to the farm for a few years and came right back. There you see it right there. In West Virginia, the Democratic winner is Gaston Caperton. He's the incumbent, beating Cleve Benedict, who is a former congressman. Incidentally, Dan, Gaston Caperton, in 1988, when he first ran for governor, promised that he wouldn't raise taxes, and then turned around right after the inauguration and raised taxes twice. His popularity dipped to 14%, and he worked it all the way back up, and he won tonight. Let's see if President Bush can do the same.
All right, Connie Chung. I want to remind you that the big core vote, the largest collection of electoral votes in the nation, 54 electoral votes, is in California. And the West Coast tier, Washington State, Oregon, California, that tier of states is going to be a long time before we know how they voted. It's another reason to stay tuned. It's also a reason for me to remind you that there are races below the top of the ticket to be decided in all of these states, 2 big Senate races in California alone. We right now have our focus on Florida. Kentucky, Virginia, Ohio, and North Carolina. Polls close in those states. When and if we get results in those states, you're going to know more about how this election is going to go. In the early going, it's inescapable. Bill Clinton is off to a very good early start. Why do we say that? Well, first of all, he's carried 2 states in the upper Northeast that normally go Republican. That would be New Hampshire and Vermont. Also, and perhaps more importantly, he has cracked into what used to be the Republican solid South by carrying Georgia. Senator Sam Nunn, Representative John Lewis, Governor Zell Miller, the Democrats got busy, pulled that through for Clinton, Gore, and Georgia, and that gives them a crack in the solid South, makes it all the more important that President Bush and Dan Quayle carry Florida, where the polls have been closed for some time now and we don't have a decision, and carry Texas, where the polls are not yet closed. Mike Wallace has been talking to people to find out why they pick the candidates they do. Mike, why do they?
In the presidential race, why did you vote for the man that you voted for today? Was it issues? Was it party? Character? Personality? Every 4 years we hear a lot of high-minded talk about why people vote, how we make up our minds. But I'm not so sure that we always tell the truth. So we thought that we would talk to a variety of Americans that you all know about why they cast their votes the way they do. Don't tell us who you're going to vote for, we said. Tell us why. Why are you going to vote for that person? See if you identify with any or all of what you're about to hear.
Every time I try and define it, it's so simple to me. I mean, I clearly understand in here in my heart what I'm looking for. And that's why I say character and competence in that order.
Every time I go into the polling booth, I imagine my ancestors, my mother and father and my grandparents, and all my aunts and uncles kind of hovering around just to make sure that I don't do anything more than punch the straight Democratic ticket.
I see too many plastic personalities with these bottled phrases, these canned words. You know that they've said them dozens of times, and I get a feeling of emptiness. I want somebody that's real.
I look for somebody who is going to inspire me to help. I want somebody to tell me that they are not going to become like what we've had up until now.
I would want to be able to look someone in the eye and say, I'm proud this guy's my president, or this lady is my president.
I'm more apt to vote for a candidate because of what I perceive to be his character and personality than I am because of anything he says he's going to do.
I like that guy's instincts. My feeling is that under pressure, he would not only be graceful, he'd be smart as hell. He would fight for America.
As we put that piece together, I canvassed my own feelings, Dan. I'm an independent, so party is not important to me. Issues? A split for me. I'm with them on some, against them on others. So why did I vote for the way I did? Mostly, I want to be proud of the man that I vote for. That's why way back I voted for Dwight Eisenhower, while after that I voted for Jack Kennedy. This year, I voted for conviction, for intellect, for capacity. Pride, perhaps, will come later. Also, Dan, we asked today voters what qualities were most important to them in deciding who they were going to vote for. Here are the results. Most of them, 37% of them, said they voted for change. And 6 of the 10 voters who voted for change voted for Bill Clinton. Next, best plan. Whatever that means, best plan. Finally, only 18% said that experience was the most important reason to vote for the man they voted for today.
Interesting stuff, Mike Wallace. 25 electoral votes for Bill Clinton, 12 for President Bush. Coming up now, basically what may turn out to be the hour of decision. So stay here with us. Our CBS News coverage will continue after these messages. Clinton off to a substantial early lead. Is it going to be a Clinton victory? Is it going to be an avalanche? We cannot tell yet. Stay tuned. We want to go now to an interview with our Washington studios Republican Senator Phil Gramm of Texas, who you may recall was a keynote speaker at the Republican convention in Houston. Senator Gramm, you have a reputation of candor. In candor, did the Republican National Convention wind up hurting the top of the ticket?
Well, I think, Dan, we would have been better off had we focused more on jobs. Whenever you're talking about something that people care deeply about, you connect. So I'm not saying that anything we did was wrong, but I think anytime you can put more focus on the thing that people care most about, you're putting lead on the target, you're getting through. Certainly, I wish we had talked more about jobs.
Senator Graham, you're a Texan, but you were reared in Georgia. When you saw the returns come in from Georgia, again, candid talk, you say to yourself, uh-oh, we're in deep trouble?
Dan, Georgia's important. We have traditionally carried it in successful campaigns. As you keep saying, the race is not over. It's still out there to be won. I am confident that we're going to carry Texas. I campaigned over the last 2.5 days in 22 cities in Texas. We had a lot of enthusiasm. We had building momentum. But Georgia is a disappointment and a setback, no doubt about it.
Polls not yet closed in Texas. Don't know how that's going to go. When does the Phil Graham for President in 1996 campaign begin?
Well, the focus tonight is where it ought to be, and that's in 1992. We're making a very important decision tonight. Obviously, I am hopeful that people are going to pick George Bush. Next year, if the president is reelected, I'm going to work to try to get his program moving. If Bill Clinton is elected, obviously I'm going to try to work with him to get America moving. But I think the votes are out there to make George Bush president again. In terms of my future, I think Republicans have got a long time, 4 years, to make a decision. I'm one of those.
Republican Senator Phil Graham of Texas, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Clinton leads 25-12 in the Electoral College, 270 Electoral College votes needed to win. There is no question that if George Bush cannot carry all 5 of the following states, Florida, Kentucky, Virginia, Ohio, and North Carolina, where the polls have already closed. If he can't carry all 5 of those, he's not only in a very difficult position to win, but could eventually be facing something of avalanche proportions. But we don't know that yet. Just want to paint you the picture of how the drama is building this hour with our usual reminder to get out there and vote. Let's go to Joe Klein and Kevin Phillips, our 2 consultants. Joe Klein with Newsweek magazine, one of our CBS News consultants, Kevin Phillips, who often advises Republican candidates, and other of our consultants. Kevin Phillips, on what you've seen and heard thus far, give us your observations and what you think we should be looking for.
Well, I think right at this point what you've got are a number of very nervous Republicans based on the polls that have run today and yesterday. They see the possibility of something pretty substantial because the president got out of control a little bit over the weekend talking about bozos and engaging in too many negatives, and there's a sense that he sort of slipped from that. So I think what we should be looking for is the possibility that the polls out today are correct in telling us that something big is happening, because that's what Washington is starting to think and starting to watch for. The idea that something big is happening out there and we could be looking at a major change in the electoral map.
Joe Klein, what makes this election different?
Well, one thing that we've been seeing for the last couple of weeks in the polls, Dan, in our CBS poll, also in Gallup, is that the level of interest in this election is far more intense than in most recent elections. And what that means is that people aren't as easily manipulated as they've been in the past. Remember in 1988, we had the year of the handler where people were talking about sound bites and photo ops and that sort of thing. There hasn't been a significant killer ad or a soundbite or a photo op this year because people really want to hear about the future. They want to hear about meat and potatoes. They dragged the political professionals into the election that they wanted this year, an election about the economy and the future.
Joe Klein and Kevin Phillips will be talking to you as the evening goes along. Over the next hour to hour and a half, you're going to know a whole lot more about who the president for the next 4 years is going to be. Clinton leads. There's some portents out there that look very promising for him. However, those big states, Florida, Kentucky, Virginia, Ohio, and North Carolina, where the polls have closed, are still hanging out there. Stay tuned for local results. We'll be back with you at the top of the hour.
This is CBS. Denise Dufala, weeknights at 6 and 11 on Cleveland's own News Center 8.
Headline of the hour, Clinton jumps to a big lead. Clinton now with 150 electoral college votes. George Bush with 12, 270 needed to win. It's the top of a new hour, just past 8 o'clock in the East, an hour of power for Bill Clinton. It could be the hour of decision. 17 states plus the District of Columbia have just had their polls closed. So far, it's a big wave for Bill Clinton. Let's look them over. Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, solidly Republican in the 80s. A bad economy helped Clinton this time. Bill Clinton wins the Keystone State, Pennsylvania. This does not mean the death knell for the Bush-Quayle chances, but to say the least, it's not a help. Illinois, land of Lincoln, 22 electoral votes. As expected, this one, they fall into place for Bill Clinton and Al Gore. Traditional Midwestern battleground goes to Clinton. Wham, Michigan, and this one will hurt the Republicans plenty. George Bush campaigned in Michigan as much as anywhere, but he loses it. Bill Clinton wins Michigan's 18 electoral votes. Ditto in New Jersey. Here's a state where Perot was a wild card in what is normally a strongly Republican presidential state. Not this time. Bill Clinton, 15 electoral votes in New Jersey. Wham, wham, wham. Pennsylvania, Illinois, New Jersey, all falling in line for Clinton. Massachusetts, one of the least surprising results of the night, 12 electoral votes goes to the Democrat, as is usually the case in presidential elections. But Missouri, southern border state where the Republicans frequently do well, again, not this time. Bill Clinton sweeps to victory in Missouri. Remember, Missouri is a heavily suburban state. That may be a portent of other things to come tonight. Bill Clinton wins Missouri. Maryland, another southern border state, 10 electoral votes, despite the fact that Maryland's Democratic governor came out for President Bush. Clinton wins Maryland, as pretty much was expected. Connecticut, one of George Bush's home states, the richest state in the nation, normally votes Republican, but Connecticut's had a bad economy. Clinton gets Connecticut's 8 electoral votes. Maine, another upper northeast state, Maine's 4 electoral votes, drop behind Bill Clinton. District of Columbia, the least surprising verdict of the evening. 3 electoral votes go to Bill Clinton. Remember that they have a death penalty on the ballot in the District of Columbia. We'll be talking to you about that later on. Clinton now jumps 150 electoral votes with 270 needed to win. George Bush has 12. The only state Bush has carried thus far has been Indiana.
Campaign 92, Election Night, with Dan Rather, Ed Bradley, Connie Chung, Mike Wallace, Bob Schieffer, and Charles Kuralt. From CBS News election headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
Good evening again. Big hour. What could be the defining hour in presidential election 92? We are not prepared to say that there is a winner in the presidential race. Not yet. But clearly, listen, you can look, you can hear, and hate it you may, or you may be overjoyed by it, but the figures, these are actual votes. This is not a public opinion poll. Actual votes indicate that Bill Clinton has jumped out to a very large early lead. However, the polls are still open in large areas of the country, and we urge you to vote. The polls have closed in just about half of the country now, and we're moving from states that George Bush needed to win but didn't win into Clinton must-win country, where the big temper is starting to fall. The big trees are starting to fall Clinton's way. The swing states, in the words of the song, swing like a pendulum do. Michigan was one of those swing states sometimes, but it's fallen for Clinton. Illinois, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. These are very big numbers. A lot of people would say there's no arithmetic that you can put together that gives Quayle and Bush a win if they don't win New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Michigan. They have not won them. However, there is a sliver of hope, a sliver of light there, because Florida, Kentucky, Virginia, Ohio, and North Carolina have not yet been decided. Take a look at the electoral vote here. 270 needed to win. The states in blue belong to Clinton. 150 electoral votes we estimate he already has when all the votes are in and counted. 270 needed to win. So far, President Bush and Vice President Quayle have only carried Quayle's home state of Indiana. There's still a lot of big states out there. Now, the polls have just closed in some other states. Look at the middle part of the country, beginning with Texas. Texas is absolutely, positively must have it for Bush state now if he's to keep any hope alive of winning whatsoever. But all those states in white are states where the polls have closed, but where we do not have enough information yet on which to base any estimate. California, that huge core element of the Republicans' quote electoral lock in past elections, does not have the polls closed. The polls are still open in much of the western part of the United States. In fact, in every western state, all the Rocky Mountain states out there on the West Coast, and of course Hawaii, the polls are still open. We urge you to vote. Your vote does count, regardless of what you may be thinking of, well, if Clinton has this many electoral votes this early, regardless of what you're thinking. 1, there is no winner yet been estimated. 2, even if they were, it doesn't mean your vote doesn't count. Get out there and vote. Ed Bradley, on the presidential side, a lot of these battleground states have been decided in the suburbs. I'm thinking particularly of states such as Missouri, New Jersey, Michigan. Clinton obviously did very well in the suburbs.
He did. You know, it was a given that he was going to win the inner cities and the big cities, that he had a natural Democratic base there. But in order to win the states, he had to do well in the suburbs. And if you look across the country, he's doing very well, winning the suburbs, 45 to 37 in the suburban votes. If we break it down by region and looking at some of those areas like in Connecticut, you've got the New York suburbs. Clinton is doing 44 to 34. The New Jersey suburbs, which also includes New York areas, and in the South around Philadelphia, Clinton is doing very well there, 46% in New Jersey, 42% in Pennsylvania. Going out to the Midwest to look at Illinois, those suburbs around Chicago, he's winning big there, 47 to 36. There were a lot of Reagan Democrats out there who are now going for Bill Clinton. In Michigan, the area around Detroit, Macomb County, the surrounding Wayne County, he's winning 42 to 36. And in Missouri, he's winning big there, 45 to 33. Bill Clinton is doing in the suburbs what he had to do to win this election.
Now, there are 9, thanks, Ed Bradley, and it's a good point about the suburbs. There are many people who called this election the battle of the malls, as in shopping malls in the suburbs. A lot of people said this is going to be decided in the suburbs. In the early going, the early to middle going, Bill Clinton has prevailed in the suburbs. 9 Senate races were in states that had their polls closed at 8 p.m. 7 of those Senate races have been decided. And let me tell you on these results from the Senate, for politicians in both parties, there's material here that will make their fingernails sweat. Bob Schieffer has details.
Well, I think one of the most important, the one that there's been a considerable amount of interest in around the country, Dan, is the Senate race out in Illinois. And I believe that we have called that for Carol Moseley Braun. Yes, we have. Carol Moseley Braun has won. There's a little history in this one, Dan. She will be the first black woman ever to serve in the United States Senate.
Carol Moseley Braun wins in Illinois, our CBS News estimate. Now, we tick off the rest of the Senate races that we have results in. Maryland Senate race. One-term incumbent Barbara Mikulski wins. The Senate's only Democratic woman far ahead. Alabama Senate race. Richard Shelby, one-term incumbent Democrat. We estimate when all the votes are in and tallied that Shelby will be returned. No turnovers so far. Connecticut Senate race. Senator Christopher Dodd, 2-term incumbent. Many thought he ran the best Senate campaign of any Democrat in this race. It certainly indicates itself in the outcome. Keep in mind also that Bill Clinton, we estimate, has carried Connecticut in his column. Dodd wins in Connecticut. Oklahoma Senate race. Don Nichols, 2-term Republican incumbent, beats back the challenge of former State House Speaker Steve Lewis. Lewis attacked Nichols' anti-abortion position, but without success in Oklahoma. A hold on for the Republicans. Kansas Senate race. Kansas, normally a solidly Republican state. Senator Bob Dole, a 4-term incumbent, had trouble with anti-incumbent mood, but our CBS News estimate is that Senator Dole will be returned to the United States Senate. North Dakota Senate race. Kent Conrad not running for his old seat. We estimate that when all the votes are in and counted, Byron Dorgan, congressman from North Dakota, will become the new Democratic senator from that state. Dorgan bounced some 98 House bank checks, but it didn't hurt him, at least not enough to defeat him, because we estimate that he will have won that North Dakota race when all the votes are in and counted. Bob Schieffer on the Senate desk now. What about that Illinois result? There were a lot of people who thought the Republican challenger was closing so fast that it would go his way even if Clinton carried the state?
I think you have to look to Bill Clinton, and I think Carol Moseley Braun owes a debt to Bill Clinton. Ed Bradley talking about how Bill Clinton was doing out in the suburbs. Look at these little exit polls on this Senate race. Carol Moseley Braun had to carry the women's vote, and she did. She got 59% of it. She also picked up 52% of the suburban vote in Illinois. I don't think that was expected. With Clinton doing so well out in the suburbs, I think that's a big part of her victory. Again, a historic thing, Dan. First black woman in the Senate.
Bob, I held up my hand because Clinton carries Kentucky. Kentucky had the polls closed very early in the evening. It was one of the first states. This has been a ding-dong battle all the way through. Bush carried it last time. Reagan carried it in the 80s, but our CBS News estimate is that in bluegrass country, once all the votes have been counted, Bill Clinton will have carried Kentucky, and of course that adds to Clinton's Electoral College lead. 270 Electoral College votes needed to win. Those are the votes that come from each individual state after the citizens' votes have been counted. Our CBS News estimate is Clinton now has no fewer than 158 Electoral College votes. George Bush has 12. Now look at the map. The states in blue, Clinton has carried. The one in red, Indiana, that's the only state George Bush that we feel confident in saying so far has definitely carried. All the states in white on your color set are states where the polls have closed but results not yet known. Of the states up there, look at Florida, Texas, and Virginia. There's no question that George Bush has to have all three of those states. He probably has to have every state in white to get himself back in the race. That could happen. Where we're watching now most closely, I would say, would be Florida and Texas. The polls have closed in both places. Too close to call at the moment. But if you want to be watching and listening as we go along here, those are the states on which you ought to have your eyes and keep your ears glued to the set now, because Florida and Texas become all important. Now, we all know that this has been a most unusual election year, so we want to try something unusual tonight, too. Something we've never done before on election night here at CBS News. Later this evening, after a winner is clear in the presidential race, we want to hear from you. The candidates are hearing from you right now at the ballot box. Remember, the polls are still open in a lot of places. Please vote. We want to hear from you later on the phone. Call us up with your comments on the outcome of Campaign 92. Now, this is important. We'll tell you when to call. Now is not the time. We'll tell you. But for now, just might jot down the numbers. Let's give you the numbers. 1-800-624-6222. 1-800-624-6222. That's for toll-free calls. No monkey business here. You don't have to pay anything. For faxes, the number is up there on your screen. We'll let you know when's the time to go for that. That's for later. So stick here with us for CBS News coverage. Fast, accurate coverage, and the best in analysis. We'll be right back after these messages, so don't go away. Bill Clinton, 158 Electoral College votes, 270 needed to win. George Bush so far has 12, all of them from Indiana, the only state that we can say with confidence that George Bush has carried so far. Now, let's show you the popular vote. Very few of the popular votes have actually been in and counted. I want to show you the popular state board, if we can get it up, because this is with only 5% of the precincts all across our country, border to border and ocean to ocean reporting. Now, as you will note, no doubt you have noted, you say, oh, whoa, wait a minute here. George Bush is leading 43% to 42%, Ross Perot 15%. This is important, folks. This was only 5% of the precincts in. These are votes actually counted. It does show Bush with a slight lead. Perot, nationwide, we believe, is running a little better than that 15%, probably up around 16 or 17%. This is one reason that so-called exit interviewing of voters is done. We feel confident in saying that as of this hour, Bill Clinton has no fewer than 158 of the 270 electoral votes sewed up. George Bush has 12. Ross Perot so far has none, although he is running fairly strong across the country at, say, 16, 17%. This is important. We'll try to get the map up to show you, but a number of states, the polls have closed. All of those in white, the polls have closed. In Delaware, no decision there yet, indication Clinton is leading. Florida, close, close, close. This is het man tight down there. In Kansas, close. Kansas, in the heart of the Farm Belt, normally goes Republican, may yet, but a very close election is indicated there. Kentucky, we have put in Clinton's column, finally, very close race there as well. Mississippi, down in the Delta country, in the Magnolia State, very close. North Dakota, very close. Ohio, a slight Clinton lead is indicated, although we are not in a position to say who's going to win Ohio. South Carolina, a Bush lead. South Carolina figures to go to Bush, at least eventually. In Tennessee, no surprise, Clinton lead there. In Texas, listen up here, in Texas, a Clinton lead is indicated. Now, Texas has had its polls closed for a few minutes now. We don't have a result in those states, but here's the important thing. If George Bush is going to come back, going to scratch his way back into the race, given the long Clinton lead in what we believe is the electoral vote total, then he needs to carry just about all of those states you saw in white. Particularly does he need to carry Florida, Ohio, and Texas. Without those three, we don't have a decision in those three. Without those three, it may be hasta la vista, adios, for George Bush and Dan Quayle. But we're not at the point where we can say that yet. It's the reason why this hour, however, is so very, very important. Now, Richard Threlkeld is in Little Rock, Arkansas, where we understand Bill Clinton has gone jogging. Well, Richard, on the basis of the results we have so far, this will be a jog downhill.
Absolutely, Dan. The crowd already here is anticipating something very, very nice for them. An update on the Clinton family activities today. Clinton and his 12-year-old daughter, Chelsea, they see them here, went jogging through the streets of rain-swept streets of downtown Little Rock tonight, stopped at a McDonald's for a glass of water. Earlier today, after they got back from this 24-hour campaign-a-thon through America, we're told they all went to the governor's mansion, sat around and watched an old John Wayne war movie, promptly fell asleep. Hillary and Chelsea on the couch and Clinton in a chair, and slept for 3.5 hours. So that's the latest on the Clinton Family Bulletin, and you heard it here first, Dan.
Richard Threlkeld, let me tell you, long ago and far away, I worked a Zesto stand in Huntsville, Texas. If a guy came in and asked for a glass of water, didn't buy anything, I'm not sure what my reaction would have been. You said Bill Clinton, his daughter, came in there, asked for a glass of water. What kind of McDonald's stand is this?
I assume he got it for free.
Here's where things stand. Bill Clinton has 158 Electoral College votes. George Bush has 12. On the basis of our CBS News estimates, 270 Electoral College votes needed to win. And what we're going to do next is take a break. Remember, there's some big states hanging out there. The election now hangs in the balance for the presidential election. President Bush has to win in both Florida and Texas and probably Ohio as well, to even get a look in, to have a chance to go later in the evening before he knows what his fate is. So stay here with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes. No. Good news for President Bush. South Carolina, as expected, falls in place for George Bush, raises his electoral vote total to 21. George Bush carries South Carolina as expected. Texas, the polls have closed. The Bush people will be keeping their fingers crossed. This is the hour of prayer for those who are pulling for the Bush-Quayle ticket, because they've got to have Florida and Texas. The polls have closed, but we don't know what the outcome is. The Electoral College vote now goes 270 needed to win. Clinton in the blue states, 158 Electoral College votes. George Bush has the red ones. He has a total of 20 Electoral College votes. We will double-check that total. Want to double-check this now. Clinton has 158 Electoral College votes, and George Bush has 20 Electoral College votes. That's 20 out of 270 needed to win. The big states hanging out there, Florida, Texas, and Ohio. George Bush and Dan Quayle must have, it's not an optional matter, they must have all three of those states to stay in the race. Polls are still open in the West. We hope that if the polls are open in your state, that you will vote. Don't listen to anyone who tells you that your vote does not count. It's possibly a decisive hour for this election, so we hope you'll stay tuned to this CBS station. We're going to break away for some local and regional reporting. We'll be back here on the half hour.
This is CBS.
From Cleveland's own.
carries Oklahoma as he did in 1988 and as Reagan did in 1980 and 84. Very close races. Florida, this one's been hanging on all night. The Republicans had hoped to have this one sewed up a long time ago. 25 big electoral votes down there. Bush is leading Clinton by the margin you see, but that's with only 4% of the precincts reporting. These are votes actually in and tabulated. On the basis of our interviews with voters as they left the polls, we know that Florida is very tight. Texas, 32 electoral votes. Another of the so-called big enchiladas, or if not an enchilada, at least a huge taco, because President Bush has to have Texas in order to scratch his way back in this race. Florida, Texas, and Ohio all hanging the balance. You can see how tight this is. 4% of the precincts reporting. Texas, a huge state. The votes come in slowly. All of these are actual votes counted. 2% of the precincts reporting in Ohio. Ohio license plates say the heart of it all, and for this election it may be, because if George Bush does not carry Ohio, it's pretty hard to see what math you could use that would have him winning the election. It's 45, 38, 17 in Ohio. None of these states do we have enough information on which to say, well, okay, this is the way we think it's going to go. Now, closed but not called states as of 8 o'clock indicate that the totals are, with 164 electoral votes for Clinton, 28 for George Bush. That includes South Carolina and Oklahoma and Indiana for Bush. Ross Perot has carried no states. That's the way it stands at this moment.
CBS News election night coverage continues. Here again is Dan Rather.
Good evening again. Southern gravy for Bill Clinton. He takes his home state of Arkansas. Previously, he carried Georgia. But the big story is and continues to be the Bush must win states that haven't been called so far. At this point, they may just be his last lifeline for re-election. It is not over. It is reaching the point of near desperation for the Bush Quayle ticket, no matter how you cut it. And we'll go to the map and show you why. Remember, the electoral vote count is what counts. 270 electoral votes needed to win. Each state decides how its electoral votes are going to go. But our CBS News estimate, always the most conservative and over the years the most accurate, says that Clinton has at least 164 electoral votes as of this hour. George Bush has 28, having won Oklahoma, South Carolina, Indiana, the states in red. Ross Perot is running nationally very strong for a third-party candidate at, say, 16.5%, but so far has carried no states. Alaska is probably his best chance. That's the way the map looks right now. Now, Ed Bradley, why is it so tight in Texas, Florida, and Ohio?
Ross Perot in Texas, Dan, Perot's getting a third of the vote in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and in the eastern part of the state. Most of those people who are voting for Perot say that if he wasn't in the race, that most of them would vote for George Bush. Taking a look at Florida, Clinton is winning the senior vote. The economy is an issue there. 43% say that it's worse, that they're worse off today than they were 4 years ago. And Bill Clinton is getting most of that vote. And also government reaction to the hurricane. 22% of the people said they had a close friend or relative affected by Hurricane Andrew, and Bill Clinton is getting more than half of those voters.
Ed, there were a lot of people, particularly in the Republican and Democratic parties, who said, listen, voters had become convinced that Ross Perot was sort of a half bubble off plum. But on the basis of results such as the ones you've just quoted out of Texas, that doesn't seem to be the case.
No, I think there's some people who believed in Ross Perot, or perhaps my sense is that there are a lot of people who just didn't have it in them to vote for either George Bush or Bill Clinton. And they felt that here's a vote, this guy's not going to win, but I'm going to vote for him anyway.
One Senate race at 8:30 decided. Let's look over the result. Arkansas Senate race. Dale Bumpers, three-term incumbent and a man at one time who considered running for the presidency himself from Arkansas. Bumpers will be returned to the United States Senate, we believe, once all the votes are in and counted. Bob Schieffer over there on the Senate desk. Still a lot of Senate races undecided, very tight. Carol Mosley Braun, our CBS News estimate is she has won in Illinois. What about the Senate race in Pennsylvania?
Well, that is one of those that is, at this point, is too close to call, Dan. We could run through those right quick if you like. In Pennsylvania, that is Lynn Yackel running against Arlen Specter. If she would be elected, if she'd upset Arlen Specter, she'd be the second woman elected tonight. In Georgia, we still, this is the Yackel graphic here. This one is still too close to call. In Georgia, Weichfowler and Paul Coverdale. We now show that Weichfowler is leading, but as yet we have not been able to call Weichfowler as the winner yet. In North Carolina, Terry Sanford locked in a battle there with Locke Faircloth. That one is too close to call. Moving on down to South Carolina, Fritz Hollings, the incumbent there. This one is still too close to call. Now moving down to Ohio, we may be close to making a call. No, I'm sorry, my graphics ahead of me here. In New Hampshire, we have John Rao, the Democrat. This is an open seat, Warren Rudman's seat, running against the governor up there, Judd Gregg. I believe we now show Rao leading there. We have not yet been able to call that, but Rao is leading in a very close one down in Missouri. This one also, this is where Kit Bond is in the a very tight contest with Jerry Rothman Surratt. We call this one too close to call. I think, Dan, we're going to be getting a call pretty quick here in Ohio, in the Ohio Senate race. That's one that's been back and forth all night. We may be close to a call, I'm told, but as yet, I see we haven't got it.
Glenn wins Ohio.
All right,
just told our
it.
CBS News estimate is bingo.
I knew
Glenn
we were
wins
gonna get
Ohio.
that.
You know, Robert, and our CBS News estimate is when all the votes are in and counted in Ohio, that the veteran Democrat, the one-time Marine and astronaut hero John Glenn, after the fight of his life, this was one of those head-butting, kidney-punching, down-and-dirty campaigns that went right down to the wire. Our estimate is that John Glenn, when all the votes are in and counted, will have won it. However, big question, who wins Ohio in the presidential race? Answer, we don't know. It's a must-win state for George Bush, as is Texas, as is Florida at the moment. Bob, a lot of people are going to be asking, why would a John Glenn be in trouble in Ohio? What's the short answer?
Oh, I think there were a couple of reasons. John Glenn, many people, consultants that politicians hired this year, they said, what do we have to do to win? They said, run as if you were running the first race of your life. And I think the incumbents we've seen tonight that have won big took that advice. Many people said John Glenn was a little slow to pick up on that. He had a tough challenger, Mike DeWine, former congressman out there, and he just gave him a real fit of a race out there. But it looks like now that, well, we have called it, John Glenn wins. John Glenn is 71 years old, Dan.
Makes a lot of the rest of us seem old. I don't know how it was around Fort Worth, Bill, but you, Bob, you talked about consultants. Around Wharton, it used to be said that a consultant is anybody more than 500 miles from home. An expert is anybody more than 1,000 miles from home. We know all of these politicians have a long tail. That is, they have consultants, pollsters, aides, and speechwriters. It's that way in every Senate race, and particularly in a big state such as Ohio. John Glenn wins in Ohio. We don't know yet about the presidential race in Ohio, nor do we know what the outcome is in Texas or Florida. What we do know, let's try to show the Electoral College map with 270 electoral votes needed to win. Bill Clinton is far out front, 164. All the states in blue belong to Clinton. George Bush has carried South Carolina, he's carried Oklahoma, he's carried Indiana for a total of 28 Electoral College votes. We're going to take a short break here, be back with more returns and analysis after these minutes.
This portion of CBS News Election Night coverage is sponsored by Merrill Lynch, we're bullish on the future, and by Oldsmobile, the power of intelligent engineering.
Update, Bill Clinton now has, by our CBS News estimate, 175 of the 270 electoral votes he needs to win. Tennessee goes in Clinton's column. 11 electoral votes from the volunteer state. This is the home state of Senator Albert Gore. The Republicans thought that perhaps they might pull an upset there. It is not to be. Clinton carries Tennessee. The states in blue give Clinton a total of 175 electoral votes. Those states are Kentucky, Illinois, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Missouri, Connecticut, the District of Columbia, Georgia, Maine, Maryland, and Arkansas. Those are the states that Bill Clinton has carried. Also, he's carried Michigan, New Hampshire, Vermont, West Virginia, and now Tennessee. George Bush so far is assured of having carried 3 states, South Carolina, Indiana, and Oklahoma. The states in white are ones where the polls have closed, but we don't have enough information on which to make a call. That includes Texas and Florida. And if George Bush does not carry both of those states at least, he has no chance. However, we don't know how they're going to go, and all the area in the West, the polls are still open. We again want to urge those of you in states with the polls open, please go out and vote, take someone with you, then come back and watch our coverage. Don't let anybody tell you your vote doesn't count, and don't let anybody decide for you in this election. Connie Chung, on the governor's desk, any more results?
Yes, we do. We have two more winners, and they're both Democrats. Let's take a look at the boards here. In Delaware, Congressman Tom Carper is the winner over Gary Scott, a wealthy real estate executive. In Missouri, Mel Carnahan is the winner over William Webster. You remember William Webster gained national attention for that Supreme Court ruling on abortion in 1989. It expanded states' powers to regulate abortions. This race had been showcased as an abortion battleground, so we wanted to take a look at how voters squared on the abortion issue in Missouri. Let's take a look at that. Those who said they supported it to be legal in all cases, 29%, legal in most cases, 31%, illegal, 35%. If you put the first two categories together, 60% were pro-abortion rights advocates. And here's the clincher. The Democrat in Missouri got 7 out of the 10 pro-abortion rights votes, plus 25% of the Republican women voted for the Democrat. I do have some obligation to tell you, though, Dan, that even though this state was claimed to be the abortion battleground among these gubernatorial races, there was another issue that was paramount in people's minds, and it had to do with the workers' compensation scandal.
Some really good referenda on the ballot around the country. Connie, we mentioned earlier the death penalty is on the ballot in District of Columbia. It's also on the ballot in Arizona and New Jersey. Any results on any of those yet?
I believe the one in the District of Columbia has gone down. I'll check on it and I'll get back to you.
Been defeated in the District of Columbia.
That's right. There are also 14 states are considering term limits, which would limit the amount of time that senators and congressmen can stay in office. It's fascinating because it shows the anti-incumbency feeling in this country.
We'll be talking a lot about many of those results later on. We have our focus on the presidential race. Bill Clinton leads in the presidential race now, has a wide margin over George Bush. Let's show you how close it is in Texas. The polls have been closed in Texas for quite a while. 32 electoral votes. There's no way George Bush can win if he carries Texas. He may not win if he does, but there's no way he can win if he doesn't carry Texas. Bush with 42% of the vote, Clinton with 40, Ross Perot with 18%, which may be part of the problem that George Bush is having in carrying the state. This is with only 6% of the Texas precincts reporting. These are votes actually in and tabulated. Yes, we interviewed voters as they came out of the polls for our so-called exit polls, but we don't have enough information yet on which we could say with confidence, well, Texas is going to go this way or that. Texas and Florida now are absolutely essential to any chance for George Bush scratching his way back into the race. Let's go over to Mike Wallace, who's been talking voter turnout. How does it look? Mike has always talked, well, voter turnout is high. Is it really high this time?
It's become clear that voter turnout today is up. How much up, we don't know. We won't have those firm figures for another hour, hour and a half. But it is way up. There's no doubt about it. In my polling place today, it was up 3 times what I've ever seen it before. The question is, why? Why has it gone up? My own speculation goes like this.
Hi, I'm glad you waited, caller. You had a brief comment.
First of all, the radio and television talk and call-in shows radicalized this campaign. Rush Limbaugh, Larry King, Phil Donahue, plus the 3 network morning shows got folks more worked up than ever before, and they gave Americans a feeling they had a bigger say in the campaign. Next, I think, came Ross Perot. He galvanized a lot of formerly turned-off voters to go to work for him. Again, they felt they had a personal stake in this election, so they turned out to vote.
I will give it everything I have for you if you will stick with me.
Register to vote. Another crowd that has almost never voted in large numbers are the young. But this time when they tuned into MTV, they heard a lot of noise about voting. MTV blasted its cable outlets with Rock the Vote, a get-out-the-vote message aimed at first-time voters.
Well, it's an election year. Once again, time to take it to the polls and decide who's going to lose and going to win.
Also on TV, non-voting Jews got a guilt trip from Jackie Mason.
1 million Jews aren't even registered, which means that Jews are not even concerned about the things that most concern the Jews. Are you starting to feel guilty?
Even the Maidenform Underwear Company got into the Get Out the Vote Act.
If you've got something to say, now's the time to get it off your chest.
And finally, sensibly, it became a lot easier this time in a lot of places to register to vote. In 8 states, people could sign up to vote while they renewed their driver's licenses. And that alone added more than 1 million eligible voters. And that motor voter registration business, Dan, is important because statistics tell us that 85% of the people who register eventually turn out to vote. And Bill Clinton, by the way, if he's elected, is anxious to do something about that. He wants to make it even easier to vote so that folks can sign up, not just when they get a driver's license, when they get a fishing license, when they apply for unemployment or for welfare. In any case, they're turning out probably, I don't want to give a figure yet, but they are turning out in much bigger numbers. Finally, one more reason that folks turned out. Back in 1988, the quality of the campaign, voters told us 42% of them found it interesting, 52% of them found it dull. This year, 78% of the people found the campaign interesting or fascinating, and only 17% found it dull.
Mike, I want to check one thing. When you said 85% of the registered voters turn out, you mean to say that the polls indicate that 85% of the newly registered voters usually turn out and go to the polls?
85% of the newly registered voters, and you know something, I'm not absolutely certain. Our statistics say if you register, 85% of you are going to vote.
With a new registration. Thanks, Mike Wallace. We all know that this has been a most unusual election year, and this election night is turning out to be an unusual one. Bill Clinton offers such a large early lead, but he is not yet even assured of victory, much less being assured of an avalanche, which many people have talked about. We want to try something unusual ourselves tonight, too, something we've never done before here at CBS News on election night. Later tonight, after we have a winner in the presidential race, and let me assure you that at CBS News, we're not going to tell you someone has won the presidential race until we are certain that's true. When we tell you that the decision is in the presidential race, you can bet the baby's milk money on it, but not before then. But after we tell you that, we want to hear from you. Now, the candidates are hearing from you right now at the ballot box. We want to hear from you on the telephone with your comments about the outcome of Campaign 92 later on. Map looks like, pause for a second, because I want to bring you right up to date on the Electoral College totals. Bill Clinton is out to a very large lead. With 270 electoral votes needed to win, Clinton has 175, Bush 28. Be back with you in just a minute.
I'm Meredith Vieira. Here are the top stories. President-elect Bill Clinton celebrates his victory and calls for creating a reunited states to face the challenge of a new century. President Bush bows to reality and wishes Clinton well. Mr. Bush says that he's looking forward to more time with his grandchildren. Ross Perot pledges his full support to Clinton and calls on his followers to roll up their sleeves and work to rebuild America.
The much-heralded Year of the Woman pays off. There will be 4 new women in the Senate when Congress reconvenes. And on today's weather map, up to 3 inches of rain will drench the southeast. It will remain windy and snowy across the northern plains.
Bill Clinton is the president-elect of the United States this morning, but his actual margin of victory is still not certain. Looking at the popular vote nationwide, Clinton has 43%, Bush 38%, and Ross Perot 19%. In the Electoral College, with 270 needed to win, Clinton has 353, Mr. Bush 160, and Perot 0. In all, Clinton won 31 states, Mr. Bush 17, none for Perot, and 3 remain undecided.
Now let's go around the horn with the correspondents who spent all these long, hard months covering this three-way campaign for us. Bill Plant is with the president-elect in Little Rock, Arkansas, Randall Pinkston with President Bush in Houston, and Scott Pelley is in Ross Perot's hometown of Dallas. Bill, let's begin with you.
Good morning, John. I'm in the old State House of Arkansas, just up the bluff from the Arkansas River. And outside here last night, thousands of Bill Clinton's Arkansas friends and neighbors, hundreds of his campaign workers stood shoulder to shoulder to help him celebrate and to hear Bill Clinton pledge a new beginning.
This election is a clarion call for our country to face the challenges of the end of the Cold War and the beginning of the next century.
Embracing the crowd with the message, "We are all in this together," Clinton reached out to Bush and Perot voters.
I ask you to listen to the voice of your leaders. I ask you to join with us in creating a reunited states a united country with a new sense of patriotism to face the challenges of this new time. We need your help too, and we will do our best to deserve it.
Clinton's exuberant running mate Al Gore voiced the campaign's hope that this election would prove to be a turning point for the nation.
This election is not simply a change of leaders. It is a change of generations. For the first time, the executive office will be occupied by leaders born after World War II.
The age of the candidates, in fact, turned out to be one of the least important factors in voters' minds, according to exit polls. Clinton won, according to those polls, among voters of all age groups. He was first among voters for whom the economy, health care, education, and the environment were most important. President Bush won among voters who cared most about abortion, foreign policy, taxes, and family values. And remembering one of the big issues of this campaign, here's a very interesting note. Clinton won among military veterans by about the same percentage that he won among the general population. And he also won among one-time war protesters. John?
Bill Plant, Little Rock, Arkansas. Thanks.
And now to Houston, where White House correspondent Randall Pinkston is standing by. Randall?
Good morning, Meredith. We're told President Bush was surprised at the size of his defeat. Senior campaign officials said they kept looking at those early exit poll results, hoping they would change, but they didn't.
The people have spoken, and we respect the majesty of the democratic system.
Despite his fondest hopes, in the end, America's voters decided it was time for a change. In his concession speech, President Bush displayed no anger and did not discuss the obvious disappointment with his stunning defeat. He held out his hand to Bill Clinton.
There is important work to be done, and America must always come first. So we will get behind this new president and wish him well.
The president's aides blamed voter dissatisfaction on the economy. Press Secretary Marlin Fitzwater defended the rough-and-tumble campaign tactics Mr. Bush employed against his opponent.
It was tough. Both candidates were tough on each other. Both candidates used strong language and strong facts to try to present their case. But I don't think it was so bad as campaigns go.
Mr. Bush will now leave it to others to figure out exactly what went wrong. The president plans to spend a lot more time with his grandkids and apparently more time outdoors. After he voted yesterday, he went out and purchased a new fishing tackle and also renewed his hunting license. Meredith?
Thank you very much, Randall Pinkston, with the president in Houston.
Ross Perot made it clear last night we haven't seen the last of him on the political stage. Scott Pelley joins us now from Dallas with more on that. Scott?
Good morning, John. The candidate who always insisted that he never paid any attention to the polls was finally confronted with one that he could not ignore. After vowing to win all 50 states, Ross Perot won none. It was a world-class defeat, but gracefully accepted.
The American people have spoken. They have chosen Governor Clinton. Congratulations. Wait a minute. No. Whoop. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. The only way we're going to make it work if they all team up together. So let's give Governor Clinton a big round of applause. He's won.
Perot could take partial credit for that win. The Texas tycoon hurt President Bush, especially in Texas. He drew large numbers of male voters who would usually go to the Republican candidate. Perot told supporters they could count on him to continue the political organization called United We Stand, and he urged them to throw their influence behind the new administration.
Spend about 10 minutes getting over being frustrated that your candidate didn't win. Then take all of this enormous creativity and talent that you've displayed, and let's make our country work at the national, state, county, city, local, and neighborhood level, and at every single school across the country, right?
But in classic Perot style, he held out the possibility that he would be back if his volunteers weren't happy in '96.
Now then, we always got the safety valve, right? We got the safety valve. You can bring that old stray dog out from the dog pound again.
Perot's share of the vote, about 19%, would be the highest of any independent candidate in modern times. But Perot may not be considered the most successful independent, because in 1968, George Wallace won fewer votes, but he still carried 5 states. John?
So, Scott, what's next for this self-styled stray dog and his organization?
Well, Perot says that he is at the bidding of his volunteers. He told them that he would perform any function, be ready for any role they may deem necessary. The United We Stand people are having a news conference this morning, and we expect them to tell us that they plan to have a continuing role in American politics.
Scott Pelley with the Perot campaign in Dallas. Thanks.
And from the presidency to the Senate now, there were some historic changes in the Senate where female candidates made inroads, but little change in the size of the Democratic majority. There were 35 Senate seats up for grabs. Democratic candidates shown in blue won 21 seats, while Republican candidates shown in red managed to win 14 seats. Before last night, the Senate looked like this. Democrats held 57 seats, and Republicans were sitting in 43. With yesterday's 21 Democratic and 14 Republican wins, there is a net gain for the Democrats of 1 seat. So the new Senate resembles the old, with Democrats holding 58 seats and the Republicans with 42.
There were 3 Senate incumbents who lost their seats. In North Carolina, Republican Locke Faircloth defeated one-term Democratic Senator Terry Sanford. In Wisconsin, Democrat Russell Feingold beat 2-term Republican Senator Bob Caston. And in California, Republican John Seymour lost his appointed seat to former San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein.
Feinstein and another winner, Democrat Barbara Boxer, are making history together in California, becoming the first 2 female senators elected in the same state. Boxer was elated.
This vision that I have in my mind of Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer walking up those steps to the United States Senate, knocking on the door, and it opens, and we all come inside. All of us together. Thank you very, very much.
In Illinois, Carol Mosley Braun added to gains made in what's being called the Year of the Woman. Braun's anger over the Clarence Thomas hearings turned her into a candidate, and she becomes the first black woman ever elected to the Senate. And in Washington State, Patty Murray, a Democrat who proudly calls herself a mom in tennis shoes, also won her Senate race. All in all, a record 6 women will be in the Senate next year, and that is double the number serving now.
In Pennsylvania, though, Democrat Lynn Yackel failed to unseat Republican Arlen Specter, who came under fire for his role in the Clarence Thomas hearings. Other winners include Democrat Ben Nighthorse Campbell of Colorado. He becomes the first Native American elected to the Senate, and new faces in the Senate will include Democrat Byron Dorgan of North Dakota, Republican Dirk Kempthorne of Idaho, Republican Judd Gregg of New Hampshire, and Robert Bennett, Republican from Utah.
And in the House of Representatives, despite the anti-incumbency mood among voters, many veterans were returned. Taking a look at the big picture, Democrats held a firm grip on the House before last night with 266 seats to the Republicans' 166, and that is little change this morning. CBS News estimates the Republicans have gained 8 new seats, with the Democrats now holding 258 seats to the Republicans' 174. 3 seats remain independent or undecided.
Coming up, we'll review other election results and check the nation's weather forecast.
And Barry Peterson will report on how the rest of the world is viewing Bill Clinton's win.
This portion of the CBS Morning News was sponsored by Nissan. It's time to expect more from a car.
It was a big night for Democrats in the 12 gubernatorial races. 4 incumbents were re-elected as they surged to victory in 8 states, including 3 previously held by Republicans. The GOP turned over North Dakota and won 3 other states, leaving the Democrats with a net gain of 2. The previously mentioned Year of the Woman in politics didn't apply to the governor's races. 3 lost their bid to bridge the gender gap.
Voters around the country passed judgment on a wide range of propositions yesterday. The big winner, congressional term limits. That proposition was approved in all 14 states where it was on the ballot. Oregon voters rejected a controversial measure to ban gay rights laws and declare homosexuality perverse. But in Colorado, a ban on state or local gay rights measures was approved. A death penalty measure was rejected in the District of Columbia, but in New Jersey, voters expanded capital punishment to include crimes resulting in unintended death. A proposal to ban most abortions was rejected in Arizona, and in Maryland, voters approved a measure banning state interference with abortion rights.
Bill Clinton's victory is being seen in many different ways in every corner of the globe. Barry Peterson reports on how the transition to a Clinton presidency is being greeted overseas.
Bill Clinton has won. He will be the
42nd President of the United States.
The election was followed as closely in the rest of the world as it was in the living rooms of America, even if a computer mistake was more generous to Perot than the voters were.
If Ross Perot is taking Pennsylvania, I'm a Dutchman.
Britain's foreign minister was quick to accept Clinton's victory.
Do you welcome his victory over George Bush?
I think we'll be able to work very well with the new president.
As the presses rolled from foreign capitals, the same message rolled in. George Bush was a man we respected, but Bill Clinton is now the man in charge. Foreign markets stayed firm, but foreign businessmen are wary.
Mr. Clinton has promised to raise taxes on foreign companies operating in the U.S., and I think that will be of some concern.
Americans abroad partied, watched, and the winners celebrated.
I see it as a whole new era. It gives such hope to our country.
This morning, the world is holding its breath, waiting to take the measure of this new man. In an era where America is the only superpower left, the decisions that Mr. Clinton makes will echo around the globe. Barry Peterson, CBS News, London.
On the national weather map, yes, there is other news. The satellite picture shows unsettled weather over most of the nation. It is gray and snowy across the northern plains, while rain clouds are building over the deep south. Later today, the southeast will get 1 to 3 inches of rain. Cold winds will continue to blow snow across the upper Midwest. The Rockies will get a bit more snow, and rain will fall in the northwest. And that is the national forecast. Now here's a look at your weather. New York, mostly cloudy, 61 degrees. Chicago, flurries, 38. Miami, partly cloudy, 85. Dallas, sunny and 53. Denver, cloudy, 36 degrees. And in Los Angeles, sunny and a warm 85. While the northern plains were shivering with below-zero wind chills yesterday, Fort Myers, Florida tied a record high for the date of 89 degrees.
Might be time to make some vacation plans. Still ahead, we'll recap the top election story on the CBS Morning News.
And John Stair will be here to catch us up on the day's business news.